Hey Techno Studs, in this video we're going to set up VLAN routing. So now I call this the project work because this is going to be our configurations from here on out. In this module, up until now, I've done some demos and I've showed you how to configure different settings and different ways of setting up VLAN routing. But this is going to be the actual configurations that we're going to use for the rest of the class. I also like to call out this project work because it's more of the practical knowledge. So we've learned a lot of how to configure these different settings and set up these different settings, but now it gets down to actual application. So the project work is more designed around application and how you would actually, most likely, or a lot of the configurations that you would use in your actual networks. So let's get started. Here is our network. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up this switch right here with layer 3 switching. And the reason why I'm choosing layer 3 switching is because there are so many advantages. I get the speed of the backplane and the ease of configuration, and I don't have to be slowed down by this connection speed going to the router. So there is a little additional cost, but because I've already got this layer 3 switch in here, I don't need to worry about that additional cost at this point in time. So I'm going to set this up with layer 3 switching. Let's jump into our demo laptop and start programming our layer 3 switch. Now, I'm already actually remoted into all of my devices here, but I've consoled into switch 1, and you'll see why here in a second. I've already got the commands all laid out that I'm going to use, and the first one is just to get into the global configuration mode. So let me paste that into my switch, and I'm into the global configuration mode. And remember, this is switch 1 that I'm configuring here. So I'm configuring switch 1 as going to be the layer 3 switch. All right, now here I'm going to get into interface VLAN 10, and I'm going to copy that and get into interface. Oh, excuse me, I skipped a step here. So the first step is I'm actually going to do IP routing. So now what this is going to do is it's going to allow this layer 3 switch to be able to route traffic. So without this command, it's not going to be able to route between the different VLANs. So I will be setting up IP addresses for each of the VLANs, and if without this configuration, without this command in here, what essentially those are is it's just a management interface, so that way on each one of those networks I could get into this switch and manage this switch. But I want more than that. I want it to actually route between these SVIs, these switch virtual interfaces. So I'm going to type in this IP routing to turn this into essentially give it functionality of that layer 3 switch. The next command I'm going to use is interface VLAN 10, get into this interface right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the IP address to be 10.1.10.1. So that's the default gateway that I have set up on my devices on the network. So I'm going to give it this address of 10.1.10.1, 255.255.255.0. And so this is where if I was remoted into this switch, I would lose connectivity. So that's why I have to plug in the console cable into this. I was remoted into this IP address right here. So I want to keep that for consistency purposes. I still want to keep the .11 so that way I can manage this device through that. So I'm going to keep that. It allows me in the future is still to route traffic based off this 10.1.10.1, but I'd also be able to only limit the management of this device to this IP address right here. So there's some things that I can do a little different with this because I have 2 IP addresses. So I'm going to make that a secondary. I'm going to do the same thing with my IP version 6 addresses. So I'll get both of those in there as well. And I don't need that secondary command to get both of those in there. All right, so then the next thing I'm going to do is going to set up the IP addresses for the default gateway on each one of these VLANs. So I'll just copy all of these. I don't need to go over all of them here. So I'm going to paste all of these into here. And then I need to save the configuration. But before I save the configuration, what I like to do is just test things out to see if it's functioning as I desire. So let's test out and make sure that we have the connectivity that we really want before we commit these changes. That way, if there is something that's wrong and it's not communicating, and maybe I've done some troubleshooting, but I need to bring this back up, one of the things I could do is just reload this router or the switch, reload the switch, and then it would come up with the old configurations and I'd be set back to where I was before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test out to make sure I've got some basic connectivity. So I can open up a command prompt and I can ping something like 10.1.10.1. I'm on the same network here, but I can just do this just for testing purposes. And I get connectivity, which is not a big surprise. I had it before, but let's try a different network. Okay, so we are getting some routing to a different network here. I can ping the Pi on that network. So let's ping that. That looks like it's functioning. Another thing that I could do is I had that script that I created in a prior video that allows me to ping a lot of different devices. So let me pull that up here. I got my test script right here. I did a little bit of work to add like the labels on here. So I've got all the management interfaces. I got the management interface, all of the management VLANs rather. So I got the management of, this is the default gateway and the 3 switches, this laptop right here, and then it's also got the IP version 6 addresses on here. So, and then same thing, I'm pinging all the default gateways. I'm going to ping the Pis. I'm going to ping the loopback addresses, although I only have a couple of them showing right here because the loopback addresses are going to be configured on some of the routers and stuff later. So we don't need to be too worried about that. So I've got this all set up and I'm going to save this configuration. And now let's open it up and test it. So I'll do the test. Everything pops up. And I can see that it's pinging these addresses, and I can go through and see if there's any of them that is not pinging. Oh, here's one right here, 3023. So one of the Pis is not pinging correctly. So I could look into that and why that Pi is not pinging. And same thing, it's another Pi here that's not pinging there. So those are probably addresses that I have not gone through and configured to be on the new VLANs yet. So I'll have to go and do that. So, but I'm scrolling through the rest of these and the rest of these are looking pretty good. So that's a fast way of testing all of this. And I'm going to go through, and I don't need to eat up too much video time here trying to look through all of these. So I'm just going to click out of here. And we are good to go. So there we go. So now I have set up this for VLAN routing, and we are routing between our networks. We're all good. So at this point in time, I've already saved out the configurations before I made these changes. I made the changes, and to follow suit with how I usually do, I'm going to save these configurations both in the startup config. So I'll just do that now, copy, run, start. And then I'm also going to grab a copy of these by going to the logging. I want all session outputs, and I'm going to do S1, and this is put today's date in here. So 10/2, and we'll call this layer 3 switch. And there we go. So I'll apply that and show run to grab a copy of that. And now I've got a copy of it saved, a backup copy in case I ever would need that for the future. So we're good to go. Everything's functioning correctly. And now we have connectivity between our VLANs.